Plot-heavy paranormal period pieces seem to be the favor of the month, as the Thaumaturge releases not long after Banisher's death. While the two share some similarities like their themes and supernatural detective work, the Thaumaturge sets itself apart by featuring turn-based combat set right before the world plunges into World War I. The Thaumaturge is set in 20th century Warsaw, following the story of Viktor Szulski, a Polish thaumaturge. A thaumaturge is like a paranormal detective who can sniff out emotions left behind on objects, influence people's mental states, and control paranormal entities called salutors. Salutors feed on, and even reinforce, extreme emotions and personality traits in humans called flaws, and can cause trouble for ordinary humans. Thaumaturges can remove a person's flaws, transferring them to themselves, and thereby taming a salutor. When caught, they can lend their power to their thaumaturge and amplify their already impressive powers. With Victor's powers, he investigates his hometown to shed light on the mysterious circumstances surrounding his father's death and to find the missing Black Grimoire, a thaumaturge book that his father left behind for him. All this while having to get reacquainted with his childhood home that's now plagued with political unrest.
That swine keeps a photo album of all the folks he's had shot at the Citadel.
The game does a great job of portraying the cultural and political landscape of 1900s Warsaw. You can vividly feel the unrest that the people felt at the time. On the economic front, notes and newspapers around town describe the working class's struggles with industrialization. And on the political front, the people cry for independence while the government holds suspicions of rebellion. The game allows you to make various decisions throughout the main story and side quests, and certain choices do allow you to change the trajectory of the narrative. This makes the game a good candidate for those who like playing games a second or even a third time, just to see how the game changes with your decisions. A thumbs up for us. However, we do feel that the plot is a little slow to pick up. The story doesn't really do a good job of motivating you to keep it going. The main story concerning the death of Victor's father didn't spur us to keep going at first, and there are two main reasons for why. First off, Victor hated his father. Victor being the protagonist is the lens through which we see the story unfold. And since Victor hates his father, as the player in Victor's shoes, some of that apathy towards his father's death is transferred to us. Although, Victor does have a reason to investigate his father's death. The Thaumaturgy book he left to Victor, the Black Grimoire. But, after his father's death, it went missing, and this is the only reason Victor has for investigating his father's death. The thing is, though, we, the player, don't know what this book does, at least at first. Sure, we know what Thaumaturge books do, as we see Victor use one constantly, but we don't know what the Black Grimoire specifically does that's so special. Victor definitely has an idea about the powers it holds, but it was never explicitly told to the players what purpose he has for the book, at least early in the game. So it's kinda hard to put ourselves in his shoes and to find the reason to put the work in to retrieve it. As you progress through the story, you start to learn more about your father and his activities as a thaumaturge, and things start to get interesting. But that happens a little after 20 hours into the game. Not a lot of people have that much patience to sit through that much time just to find motivation for whatever they're doing in-game. The gameplay has two main parts: investigation and combat. In the investigations, you walk around the map sniffing out clues with your thaumaturge powers. These clues either lead you to new side quests to do, or help you to progress through the main story. The more information you gather, the more dialogue options you are presented with when talking to NPCs. Gathering clues and information also gives you some experience to level up and get more skills. This gameplay story tie is great as it gives you some incentive to find out more about the world and the characters that the game devs set up. The combat portion of the game is fairly unique. Personally, it's been a while since I've seen turn-based gameplay in this style outside of JRPGs. It's fairly new territory for me. However, much like the story, it takes a while before the combat gets interesting. Throughout the game, you encounter salutors, and as we mentioned, a thaumaturge can catch salutors to be their spooky little paranormal Pokemon. You have 4 basic salutors at your disposal. However, before you have all of your 4 basic salutors, it seems like Upir and your basic attacks are the only thing that you need to win fights. So until you get to that point, fighting feels fairly monotonous. This issue is compounded by the fact that the animations are kinda plain and a little slow. But once you get all 4 of your basic salutors, skill effects and skill synergies become something to consider, and building your skill set becomes enjoyable. Choosing what effects you want to have on your arsenal of skills starts to feel like you're building a TCG deck. You try to anticipate what your enemies play and equip yourself with the appropriate skills. Certain skills work well with certain salutars, so you also have that dimension of considering which skills pair well with a certain salutar. The skills bring a lot of diversity to executing your game plan, and are probably the best part of the combat system. The game's setting is depicted beautifully. The dark gothic aesthetic, along with a historically accurate depiction of the architecture, creates an immersive atmosphere that truly takes you back to 1900s Warsaw. The major characters are distinct and designed well, however there is the problem of the graphical bugs and glitches here and there. Despite the game being installed on an SSD and being run on a fairly capable AMD card, and Thaumaturge being an AMD title, we still suffered from stuttering and assets loading in a little slower than expected pace. There's also the very jarring and sudden face twitching in certain parts of the cutscenes and dialogues that really take you away from the experience.
Shut up! Hey you!
Oop, there it is. We were, however, given a pre-release version of the game, and the devs did mention that they are aware of these bugs and will fix it on the release version. So here's the hoping that they do. We found the musical composition to be fitting for the game setting, although not particularly memorable. It does create a pleasant ambiance while exploring the world, and the combat theme is also a good piece when you stop and listen to it. The voice acting is probably the biggest hit or miss in the entire game though. Victor's voice actor did a good job, but some of the other NPCs were lackluster. Also, it's a little weird how many different accents there are in this game. Some characters sound European, but other characters sound like they're speaking American English when they most likely are not at all American.
What kind of a sick idea is this? Kidnapping me?
It's a joke! You don't find it funny?
No.
It's a little nitpicky maybe, but it kinda does take you away from the experience when you do notice it. Also, later in the game, you have to talk to a kid, and they definitely sound like an adult trying to sound like a little kid.
So what if it is? What's it to you? They've already caught the murderer.
Now that took me out of the immersive experience. Another problem we have with the audio is that some dialogue audio fades out before the character finishes speaking, and sometimes it outright cuts off, or you have a hard time hearing the last word a character says because it's already faded out.
I was born here. Now I've come home.
Welcome to Warsaw.
We've also encountered a bug that suddenly increases the volume of the background music, so much that it's hard to hear what the characters are saying over the music. Again, we hope that the release version fixes some of these irregularities in the game. Despite the generally slow start to almost everything, from the story to the combat, the Thaumaturge presents a playable game with a fun combat system and an interesting enough story. Again, if you can get past the slow start. The many choices and equally many consequences of said choices give us a game that you can play and replay, just to explore all of the other aspects of the story that you might have missed in the first 1 or 2 playthroughs. Though we encountered some weirdness and bugginess while playing the game, we know that the devs have acknowledged some of them, so we think and hope the experience post-launch will be a much better one. All in all, despite its flaws, the Thaumaturge is a fun game with interesting concepts, and we give it a 7.6. Are you picking up the Thaumaturge? Have you played it already? Feel free to tell us in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you like the content and want more video game related news and reviews. And we'll see you in the next video.